Everybody, thank you so much for tuning back in. My name is Joseph Hoolihan, and this video might be a little bit of a touchy subject because apparently there's still a big misconception, even today in later 2023, that owning a home is less expensive than renting. And usually when that comes up, people are referring to the payment, the monthly payment of renting a home compared to owning a home, or renting an apartment compared to owning a home. So let me tell you why. So unless you've been living under a rock for the last couple years, you've seen the housing market go absolutely crazy. Housing prices have gone through the roof during COVID with super low rates that were not seen before. And now a little bit later in 2023, especially later in 2023, we've seen housing prices kind of settle down. In some cases, go down a little bit. In some cases, maybe even go up a little bit. But rates have gone through the roof compared to what they used to be just a couple years ago. Now, a lot of people will mention that in the grand scheme of things, if we look at many decades ago where interest rates were in the teens or the 20s, it's really not that big of a deal to see them now in the 6s, 7s, 8s, even 9s in some cases. But for somebody that was shopping for a home a few years ago or has never owned a home before and is only knowing what rates used to be, seeing a rate that is in the 5s, 6s, 7s, again, 8s and 9s, is astronomical compared to what it was just a couple years ago. But even just a few years ago, people would come in and ask for a home and expect that their payment was going to be less expensive for their home than it would be for their renting. And I'm still getting that today, even with interest rates being in the 6s, 7s, 8s, and 9s. And for those of you that haven't owned a home before, aren't as familiar with how interest rates work, the interest rate on your mortgage plays a significant role in what your payment will be. And so the easiest way to think about it is the higher the interest rate, the more expensive the payment or your monthly payment is going to be, because you have to pay interest on that. And that's what your interest rate ultimately affects. But still to this day, I get families coming in to purchase their first or second home and are expecting a relatively low payment. To give you an example, today I had buyers that were pre-qualified for about $350,000. And they did mention that this was more geared towards a used home, not necessarily a new construction home. And for a community that may or may not have had CDD fees and HOA fees like most new construction communities do. They had planned on doing an FHA loan, which only requires about 3.5% of the purchase price as your down payment, but we're expecting a total all-inclusive payment. Now, they're used to renting for about $2,200 or $2,300 a month, and we're expecting their housing payment to be a little bit higher, which is fantastic. However, because interest rates are so much higher than they used to be, that payment was actually about $3,450. And now, when I say an all-inclusive payment, that will typically include your principal, your interest, and in many cases, people will refer to that alone as their mortgage payment. But for somebody that's using an FHA loan or any loan that's typically under 20% down payment, with the exception of a VA loan, you have to pay PMI or private mortgage insurance of about $2,500. This is essentially an insurance policy that protects the bank, does not protect you, and depending on your credit score, this can be a hefty chunk of change on your monthly payment, in addition to the principal and interest. And some other things that we try to include in that all-inclusive payment expectation for you are going to be things like property tax, homeowners insurance, and then CDD fees, and then HOA fees, plus any other miscellaneous fees that might be included with home ownership, with the exception of things like yard maintenance, electricity, water, those kinds of things. So needless to say, when this family was expecting roughly a $2,500 payment and they saw about $3,450 a month, they were a little shell-shocked. But the most common thing that I've noticed is that people and families are not comparing apples to apples. Typically when you rent, you're in an apartment or a relatively small home, right? So you might be comparing your 1-bedroom apartment or 2-bedroom apartment, let's say 3-bedroom apartment, but then you go out and look for a 4, 5, or 6-bedroom house. We cannot compare those payments because they're not apples to apples. That your apartment complex is not the same as your home in that community. And so inevitably, when you're purchasing something that's, say, much bigger or much nicer that you own compared to what you're renting, which is going to be much smaller, much more basic typically, you can expect to pay a bit more, but for some reason, some people still expect to pay less for that much larger purchase than what they were renting on something relatively smaller. And that's just not the case. So maybe more important now than ever, if you are looking for a new home, get pre-qualified and find out exactly what you can pay for and get a payment estimate from that pre-qualification or from that loan officer. That's going to be able to tell you what you can afford monthly. That way you can go out and look for that. Because if you're expecting your rent payment of $2,300 or $2,400 to be similar to what you're purchasing in a home, even though that home is much bigger, you're going to be vastly disappointed when you find out how much more expensive a housing housing payment is compared to what it was used to be, and then also compared to what your rent currently is. So set that expectation for yourself quite a bit higher, in the sense that you need to be able to afford a lot more, and that you need to be able to pay for and afford a lot more to get into that home than you would with the. Now, if you or any friends or family members are currently looking for a home, please feel free to share this information with them. It helps get the message out. It helps me make more videos, and hopefully this provided some valuable information for you. If that was the case, please feel free to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave those below. I try to reply to everything that comes through and get you all the information that you need. If you're looking for a home for yourself, please feel free to reach out as well. I'll always point you in the right direction. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.